happy to take questions or criticisms or responses or anything anybody wants to ask or add.
How much server space for an online journal?
Not that much. I mean, a relatively small amount of space. Nothing that's going to make your IT people roll their eyes. I mean, it's more than a PDF file because you include multimedia and such. But we hardly ever think about it. It's it's in the megabytes, hundreds of megabytes. Sometimes, occasionally, a gigabyte or two. But it's nothing that current technology is not going to be able to handle. So I think the big question is, where do you find server capability? The problem with most IT operations, I used to be the vice president for IT at the CUNY Graduate Center, so I know this from the inside. The big problem is an unwillingness in a lot of IT departments to use open source software. Not because they're really worried about it, but they don't like the idea that they can't control it through typical means like a Microsoft IIS server. And that's a huge issue, and I don't minimize it, but there are ways around that.
They can start using the WordPress server at publish.uic.edu. It's just rolled out. My question would be whether you can use CBox, roll CBox into that, if someone was interested.
Well, that's an interesting question. We've started to talk about using CBox in that way and sponsoring. This is something the CH&M does, with its Zotero and Omeka sites.
Could you just explain a little bit what that question is?
Well, so the issue is where do you get server space? Where does your site live? And ideally, I would argue you don't want it on a WordPress.com site. You don't want to use it's free to be sure, but you need to control what you do inside your own institution, ideally, if you can. And so my first line of approach would be to talk to the IT people and say, can you do an open source server, the LAMP server that I described?
What I'm saying is we have that right now.
You have it.
We have it. So
Then all I would say to you, I didn't understand your question. All I would say to you is CBox is available for you for free. You can install it, and the beauty of CBox, Commons in a Box, the software I talked about, is that there's a very rich and growing, because there have been 10,000 downloads, a growing community of people. You have a problem or a question using CBox, you post to the CBox blog, you're going to hear 20 responses very, very quickly. Plus we have arguably one of the 2 or 3 best programmers in the country working on WordPress and BuddyPress. Boone Gorgas is our website lead developer. He can respond to any of these things. So we are very much in support of the idea of CBox rolling out in a variety of places. One of the first places that adopted it was the MLA. It's the largest professional organization in the country. They're using it to roll out what they call MLA Commons. And what they want to use it for is building a social network. And that's exactly what CBox does that a WordPress.com site cannot do. Because that's only going to give you blogging. What CBox does is it gives you the social networking software that goes along with it. You can create groups. You can have, that's CUNY, I gave you the CUNY Pi one, just as a whimsical example. You can create groups very easily on the Academic Commons or on CBox. And that's one of the most important things that has helped to build the organization. It takes, frankly, it takes the power to use technology away from the central administration and returns it to the faculty and the students. That's why we've had an interesting fight at CUNY over who's going to control this, and so far we're winning that battle. And I can tell you, our central CUNY CIS operation is pissed that we have this much control and power. They hate this thing, and I take it that is a very good sign that we're doing the right thing.
well, it's also, I'm speaking from the computer center. But if people would like to start using the WordPress site, the ITL would be very happy to help them out.
There you go.
The question, I will research to find out if we can roll CBox into our existing structure.
I think you probably can
We
without
probably
much.
can, but I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to promise that. But I'd be happy to help anybody out.
Excellent.
To set up anything like that here. That's a good idea. A nice break.
Thank you. Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. You were in the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the library already has an open source journal publishing software program. If anyone is interested in starting up their own journal, we already have something set and ready to go.
Have there been any takers yet?
Oh, sure. We have 5 journals. Well, actually more than 5 in there now. And 2 of them are actually also archived in PubMed Central. They're medical ones, but there's at least one humanities one in there, some social sciences. So we're definitely interested in getting more journals published in there. So.
Holly Thistlewaite, who is our chief librarian at the CUNY Graduate Center, has totally remade our library and our library staff, and it's completely gone toward the digital. And she's got a number of digital service librarians who work with faculty and graduate students. So our pathway has been made a lot easier by a library that, as it sounds like you're doing, has started to understand that things need to change in a fundamental way, and that online academic publications, scholarly journals, is going to be a wave of the future.
Yeah, so I thought it was a wonderful talk, and I could tell how wonderful it was because it made me feel very guilty about all the things I do badly now.
That wasn't my intention.
So at the AGA, I was talking with somebody who does a lot of digital pedagogy at George Mason, which I consider the Mecca. And he said that actually most of his colleagues in the history department disdain him. And I was really surprised, so I'm wondering if you feel like it's not just the administration that's the enemy, but your colleagues as well are not fully on board, and if so, how do you respond to that?
You know, as my Aunt Gogo used to say, some people you can't be nice to. You try your best, and at some level you can't make it happen. And so I think I don't want to be, too dismissive of that. There are some faculty who will never get this and never understand it. I've made my decision at the end of my career. I'm going to be doing this for a few more years, but not forever. I've made my decision I'm going to throw in with younger faculty across the CUNY system and with graduate students, because I feel like there are senior faculty who can be convinced of this, and they're people I try to work with, but mostly when they don't, it's like spitting in the wind. I mean, you're not going to convince people to change that easily. So I'm not saying dismiss them, but try to do what you can to find colleagues and comrades who you can do the work with. So what I do, my job now, as I see it in teaching my ITP program, I have the good fortune of being able to team teach the courses I offer to doctoral students. I always work with a young colleague, particularly from the community colleges, with this horrendous workload that they have. Giving them a course release to come and teach doctoral students is like a pleasure for them. So I've been working with a lot of younger faculty, and my job is to sort of get the next generation of people ready to do this. So I pass the torch and they can carry it on. It's a long struggle. This is not going to be won automatically. And I think there are a lot of people who are going to disdain digital technology moving forward because they see it as undermining something sort of fundamental about what the university is. I'm willing to have the argument, but at a certain point, if you can't convince them, you can't convince them. Leon.
Yeah, well, you want some criticism, so.
Anything you want, you know.
But, no, it seems to me that there's a big continuum in the rich range of projects that you lay out from the, I would say, maybe one end, one of the last ones you mentioned was undergraduates who effectively are disseminating their work to other students, which seems like a wonderful idea. I wonder if you didn't say anything about how that's worked out in practice, but I think that would, I could immediately see it's...
You're talking about the Whitman project that I talked about.
Yeah, and you said that effectively to have undergraduates break down just this silence that happens with undergraduate papers, right, or even graduate for that, yeah, either one, but have a wider circulation. I wonder if you could comment on, exciting examples of how that has worked in practice. But yeah, let's say that to me is that's kind of one end, that's sort of the common end of the spectrum. And then at the very beginning of the talk, you were talking about these 2 or 3 books that have used more simultaneous commentary, kind of blogging, critique,
The media comments, yeah.
editorial, much more group editorial process. And at that end, let me just ask you about that end for a second,
Yeah.
because that for these particular projects, I definitely see how the 50 comments or by people interested in the field, how that would enrich the project. But as the editor of a journal myself, one of the tough decisions is to decide what doesn't make the cut.
Sure.
How do you make that decision when you're opening it up to everybody in the field to comment simultaneously? How do you deliver the bad news, if there's going to be any bad news, or does everything just go out then in an undifferentiated way?
That's a great question and a totally fair one. I can say a little bit about how Kathleen's book worked because I know that story well. There are a couple of other books that have used similar media commons blogging software to do it. I think in each of those instances, the presses had made a basic commitment to publish the book, and what the author said was, in addition to the standard double-blind peer review that you're going to send it out for, I would like to do this as an experiment. That's what Kathleen did with her book. And so it wasn't thrown open to the world. It went through the same double-blind peer review that a traditional NYU Press publication would get, but it had, in addition, this other sort of level of review. And it was an experiment precisely because they wanted to see what was the quality of the interaction and what did she learn more from. And by consensus, she got more from the Media Commons review by 50 people who she could engage with directly while it was happening than she got from the double-blind peer review. The book was obviously published. And would it have been as good a book without that Media Commons thing? I think probably not. I think if she'd left it, because she herself said, the amount of editing and revision she did in response to what she got online was substantial, and she felt the book was very much strengthened, and so did her editor at NYU Press. It's one experiment. It doesn't prove that this is the way to go. I think what I'm interested in doing, what she's interested in doing, is helping us rethink the standard review model. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have mistakes or that you wouldn't run into those kind of problems. So let me explain to what we do on JITP. Every review is open. We send it out to a group of outside reviewers, 2 reviewers outside the editorial collective, and we get a response from those 2 reviewers in the field. If both are negative and the people from the editorial collective in charge of that issue think that they shouldn't move forward, we tell the people it's either rejected or they're going to have to revise and resubmit it. If they basically get positive reviews but they need revisions, we then send to people inside the collective and the collective responds to it. And the goal here is always to sort of try to work with the submitters to get them to improve their pieces. So one of the things that we've instituted, I'll show you this here, we did what we call behind the scenes, which is an effort, let me get to issue 3. So this was an article that a colleague at the LaGuardia Community College did on academic review and advancement to candidacy, advancement to tenure. He's in media studies and production. And what we've done with behind the scenes is open up the review process. And we've said what we're going to do. In this case, we did a video with him. The editors of the piece sat down and we said, let's go talk through what the review process was like for you. What did you think of the first stage of review? What did you think of the second stage? And we had this honest exchange and conversation. And the goal here is very much to demystify the review process. Because for most graduate students and young faculty, they're not fully cognizant of how that process works in most instances. This is a way to demystify and open up that process. And we are going to institute this every issue of the review. We're going to do it behind the scenes on one key article where we get the author's permission to say we're going to review this thing. So I think Does this solve the problem? Do we reject articles in giant TV? Absolutely. But when we're willing to work with an author and we put them through some significant paces editorially, we want to show what's involved in that process. I encourage you to take a look at these. I can't show it to you now, but there's one for issue 3 and one for issue 4 as well. Yes?
So does that mean that either you're rejected and nothing will happen, or you're accepted by the blind reviewers and then you go into this open review process? Because I think your question was partly like, what about people, if the review process is open to the public just in general, what happens to the...
No, ours are not open to public. I don't want to conflict these two things. I'm sorry if I gave that impression. We have not yet used the media commons. We're trying to establish the journal, and we're in a brand new field, and that's part of the issue, is we're trying to define a field as it's like flying a plane while you're building it. So we haven't done a media commons type thing. We have plans to do that in the future. We're going to try to do on a limited basis an open peer review to see what it works like. And probably what will happen will be one of the members of the editorial collective who's willing to step up and subject themselves to that kind of review process, with no guarantees. In other words, the editorial collective maintains the final word, but it's a collective. The way when I came up with this idea from my work on radical history review way back in the 1970s when I came to New York, we had an editorial collective, not an editorial board, and not a single editor, but somebody who was, we had a collective set of responsibilities, and that's hard, and it takes more time. There's a lot of discussion. We spend a lot of time on this thing, but we're very happy with the results, given that it's a brand new online journal. Yeah.
I have one more question too. You mentioned self-exploitation and the amount of labor that, because it's not free to run an online journal.
It surely is not.
And many people in this room already spend that kind of effort, not necessarily on the open access journals, but I mean, it's something we do in addition to sort of the work that it's visual,
right.
That's very visible. And I was thinking, I'm from the University of Bergen, I'm visiting this semester, and our university, and I think several other universities, have just started this, they give funding for open access, so you can pay a company or a publisher or a journal so that your article or your book will be open access. So our university just started, they advertise now this funding like that. And I think more institutions are starting to do that, which is a sort of a different model.
Way different model.
It is.
And open access by itself does not mean that it's going to be any less exploitative in a business model. There are lots of business models out there now which are tricking themselves out as open access and soliciting stuff and then telling people, if you pay, we will publish your article. It's a kind of, it's everything we don't like about publishing in general. It's made worse by that environment, which is why my argument is faculty and students need to control the process. And if you can keep it in-house, you have a much better chance. How you avoid the self-exploitation, I have no idea. I self-exploited when I worked on Radical History Review, and I'm self-exploiting 40 years later working on Journal of Interactive Technology and Pedagogy. I think that's just the nature of academic and intellectual work. But at least you're not left to the vagaries of some sort of business model where the people who control the actual publishing and distribution outlet really have the final say. We don't have any publication costs beyond setting up the server. And that's the good news. Plus, we can do everything multimedia. There's no problem or issue putting video, audio, visuals, text, whatever, in any article, and we encourage that. We're telling our people we solicit articles from, be as freewheeling and open about what you want to include in your piece. The more multimedia from our perspective, the better, because we want to be able to use the power of the web in this way. That's the power of web publication. You're not only not using dead trees and having to put it through the mail, you're also sort of opening up the possibility of using multiple formats. And that's, my whole career has been devoted to that, so I'm really thrilled to be at this point. I did it, with CD-ROMs for a long time because I thought that was what was going to be the change agent, and then the web came along in '95 and everything changed.
Do you think we should do the same thing for monographs? I know, like, there's Open Humanities Press, which does online, multi-modal.
Yeah. I just did a review for their book I did a review for them on a book called interestingly, digital pedagogy. And it was very much available completely online instantly. I don't know, maybe. I mean, I think what we need to be is a little experimental. We need to try different things. The problem is, you know, the pressure on young faculty is to have a standard monograph published, you know, between two covers, you know, in a traditional model. That is not a sustainable model given the economy and given how tight academic library budgets are. You know, back in the day when I was a graduate student, you just needed to publish your book, and the guarantee was 300 to 500 libraries would buy the hardcover edition. That paid for the publication. It was the simplest thing in the world to run an academic press. That's over. I mean, that is just not happening anymore. And because the number of academic publications has grown, what do? The funnel is getting tighter and tighter. This is one alternative, but what this takes is a commitment on the part of senior faculty to accept that this is as academically rigorous as traditional publications. I would say it is. I would argue that any of the things we publish in this journal is as rigorously reviewed and edited as anything that could be done through a conventional print publication. I'll leave that to other people to see if they think I'm right, but I really do believe that that's the case. So if we can do that, then I think we've got another possibility.
Which leads to the obvious question: how successful have you been in changing mindsets at CUNY's Graduate Center for P&T?
Well, one of my jobs as the Senior Academic Technology Officer for the Graduate Center is I am the advocate for doctoral students who are interested in incorporating digital technology into their final dissertations. Are we at the point where a fully digital dissertation has been accepted? No. But what I'm increasingly finding is people are coming to me from a range of academic programs and departments, their faculty members and the students, saying, what can I do to add a digital piece to my dissertation? And the reality is the library's been wonderful, and even ProQuest has been wonderful. Neither the library nor ProQuest has any limitations on the format for dissertations that they will accept. We think that it has to be PDF or nothing. That's not the case. I mean, there's a negotiation to be had with both the library and ProQuest when you want to do something unusual digitally, but it's entirely possible to do that. So one of my jobs at the Graduate Center is to make that happen. We're starting to turn that around, but it takes a long time to convince faculty. My administration is much more prone to do this than a lot of the faculty who sit on, you know, doctoral dissertation committees. So I'm often asked, I'm on a diverse number of Ph.D. dissertation committees, in part because I'm the one person at the Graduate Center who can understand the digital aspects that a lot of students are using in sociology, in urban education, in linguistics. I just sat on the linguistics one, where the chair had no clue what the student was talking about, because she was doing stuff related to Twitter and using Twitter as a research source. So I think it's a process, and I think what we're going to try to do is provide some examples of how academic scholarship can be transformed, but there's no magic bullet in this, no simple way to make it happen. It's starting to change. It's starting to change in CUNY, but not quickly.
This might be kind of a silly question, but I'm a graduate student in history, and so I'm kind of thinking a few years out, I want to be sort of better at digital humanities, and both as a public historian and for teaching purposes. But I've always been sort of daunted, it's daunting how much, I'm not very tech savvy. So how much do I need to be sort of learning another language to engage with these tools? Do I need to be taking classes, or are there books you recommend that are kind of building up to this higher?
I recommend I will be sending, whoever attends this will get a list of the web links and the books that I mentioned, and the books that I mentioned could be helpful to you in that regard. I would say this, there's a big debate in DH whether you need to be a programmer in order to be a DHer. I fall very heavily on the side that says no. I don't think you need to learn program language to be a DHer. I think what you need to have is a different orientation to what history scholarship is. And one of the things you should look for, I don't know if you attend the AHA or the OAH conferences, but if you do, there are increasing numbers of sessions, both inside the conference and outside the conference, immediately proximate to it, where you can take workshops, short workshops on DH. The Center for History and New Media runs a That Camp. I don't know if you've heard of That Camp. You might want to take a look for that, THAT. Humanity, I can't remember what the acronym of THAT stands for, but I think it's Humanities and Technology. And what it's really about is an opportunity for you to go in an environment where you would say, here's what I'd like to learn. Are there other people who feel the same way? And then the unconference gets organized around that. So look for those and look for sessions at the OAH and the AHA. And the other thing I would say is if you get the Chronicle of Higher Education, follow the Wired blogs that they have. There are many people. I mentioned one, Claire Potter's, tenured radical. She's a historian. There are a lot of people who blog regularly on this subject. Start to get familiar with it. You can also, I don't know if you use Twitter, but I would recommend Twitter as a way to kind of, if you follow the right people, you can get a fairly regular Twitter stream on Digital Humanities. There are a number of people who you can follow, some of whom I mentioned in my talk today.
The other resource we have is lynda.com. It's free for everyone. And if you go out to go.uic.edu/lynda with a Y and look up Twitter, WordPress, blogs, you'll get a wide selection of really short videos. And if you like watching videos, there's a way to understand things. You don't have to be a programmer at all. That's right. Partner with you. This will give you a step-by-step introduction to that, and you can apply those things to instances where you might have in a class.
One of the reasons I talked about the digital praxis class that I mentioned that Matt Goldman taught is I thought it would be something that your colleagues, faculty colleagues here might think about doing some version of. It seems to me there's probably enough skill in this area, in this university, to be able to organize, if not, well, ours is fairly ambitious. It's a first year, 2-semester course for entering students, but you could do something, and I would think this would be an opportunity for you to recruit people like this to this effort. Yes?
Did you offer that to all entering students?
Say again?
Did you offer it to all new students? I mean,
No, only the Graduate Center.
Oh, okay.
Only the Graduate Center, no.
That would be awesome.
No, that's why the academic commons is not, well, you may have noticed I didn't say undergraduates because we could not possibly deal with 270,000 undergraduates. To say we're a mom and pop shop is barely accurate. It's a small boutique operation. So at the moment we can handle 5,000. We could probably handle 10,000. We certainly could not handle 270,000. So my instinct, at least what we did with digital praxis, was to limit it to graduate students. We had in that first class about 40 students who signed up for it. It wasn't a requirement. We made it available, and master's and Ph.D. students took it and have committed to a whole year. A lot of programs will dissuade them from doing that or not even give them the flexibility to take a course like that. Yeah.
But, so I was in Norway. I was actually on this national committee trying to figure out why Norway didn't invent Spotify. Norway isn't quite up there with inventing new cool tech things. So they had this national committee, and one of the chapter I thought was most interesting was we were asked to think about like digital competency in the population, which it's just, and I think it's probably the same almost everywhere. Kids don't learn programming in school. Kids learn to use, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing, we teach our kids to use technology to make PowerPoint presentations and Excel. They can figure out how many kids like real writing in Excel, but they're not really learning, what to do with it beyond that. So we're teaching them to be consumers. And that's something I actually really deeply think we should be teaching our students in universities. It's really hard to get your brain around how to get that there, because although there are some people with great ideas and skills, there's not enough of us to teach all the undergrads, and we should be actually.
Yeah,
Is that something you think?
No, I think it's a very good point. I think digital literacy is a really important subject for undergraduates to understand. They may be facile using particular technologies, but they don't necessarily have a clear sense of exactly what the web is or how it works. One of the things I'm noticing with students who graduate from our ITP program with a PhD in an academic discipline and the ITP certificate is they're often hired in this case even for tenure track jobs, to be the sort of young scholar, the young new scholar in their department that's going to help the department think about those kind of approaches in new and innovative ways and help. So I've had a couple of students who've already started new positions, one at SUNY New Paltz, who was in effect told by her department chair as part of her first year assignment, you have to help us think differently and better about how to use digital technology and how to teach digital literacy to our students. And I think that's more and more going to be the case as my generation ages out and there's a kind of turnover in the faculty, although that's a slower process. I love to tell this anecdote. When I went to my provost and said at one point I was thinking of retiring, he said to me, "You can't retire." And I said, "Well, respectfully, you control a lot of my life, but you can't tell me when I can retire." And he said, "Well, you can't retire because if you retire, I'm 68. So I was saying I would retire at 70. He said, "The average age of our faculty goes up." We have people in their 80s in the graduate center still teaching. So, you know, it's all relative. How long do people teach is an interesting question. It was the same thing that Leon and I faced when we were young scholars. It was, when was this generation of old farts going to finally hang it up? And a lot of them didn't hang it up for a long time, you know. It took forever. So the university is not self-replicating in quite the obvious ways that it should. But I do think seriously that young scholars with this skill set can be very helpful.